Hello again everyone, and welcome to my next video. As you know, I have recently partnered with Rabbi Gestetner in presenting to you a series of videos that refute the false and erroneous statements made by charlatan rabbis discussing supposed divorce halacha. While I have so far recorded 6 parts in that series, the project is still not complete and more videos in the series will be forthcoming. But at the same time, I would like to thank you all for demonstrating your support for this channel in the form of many likes and new subscriptions. From your feedback, I have learned that many of you have requested a video about how to navigate the turbulent waters of Jewish divorce in the crazy times that we find ourselves living in. So therefore, I have decided to honor your request and present to you this instructional video of how to proceed with a halachic Jewish divorce. I am sure you will not want to miss a word of what is about to be said here, which will be sincere advice and vital information that you will not hear anywhere else. So whether you are a man or a woman, parent or grandparent, brother, sister, aunt or uncle, Ashkenazi or Sephardi, you or someone you love is bound to be caught up sooner or later in the horrible scourge that is modern divorce. The information being presented here might prevent someone dear to you from falling prey to this corrupt system, and you will never get this information from your local rabbis. That is because they are too afraid to talk about it, some of them due to the fear of crossing into the political wilderness, while others are just plain ignorant, towing the line in order to fit in with what the other rabbis are doing. So please like and share this video with as many people as you think need to hear this message. I would just like to remind you at the outset of this video that any advice or information stated herein should not be misconstrued as giving you the right to violate any civil law or statute in your jurisdiction. Please obey all local laws and statutes and consult with an attorney before taking any action that can be interpreted as being in violation of the law. The rabbinic corruption seen today in matters of divorce has been a wheel set in motion for the past few decades and is getting worse by the minute. I will link for you below numerous letters written by rabbis during the past 30 years warning us of the impending doom that is today Jewish divorce. I say this because it is important for you to understand that what you will hear today is not just my own thoughts or opinions. I am merely repeating for you some of the words and advice of the good rabbis of the past generations who had the courage and foresight to warn us about the blatant rabbinic violations occurring in matters of Jewish marriage and divorce. It is such a vast subject with much paper and ink already having been spilled over it, so I will only try to summarize for you here the most pertinent facts that you might need in order to protect your halachic rights and to hopefully shield you from some of the tyranny inherent in this process. So I will begin now with a short list of 2 uncontroversial facts. Fact number 1. In Jewish divorce, which involves the granting of a Gett from the man to the woman, the process is unilateral in that only the man can initiate the writing and the delivery of a Gett. A Gett must be written and delivered at the pleasure of the husband out of his own free will and never under any duress. Except for some rare occasions, which nowadays rarely even exists, a Gett can simply not be coerced from a man. Period. End of story. Any such coercion renders the Gett invalid and unkosher, and the woman must receive a new Gett from her husband before she marries another man. This coercion that I speak of pertains to anything involving public humiliation, whether it is from newspaper postings, social media platforms, defamatory video statements, harassment, false issuance of seruvim, litigation in civil courts, false arrests, orders of protection, the kidnapping of children, and physical beatings, which all overtly or covertly bring pressure upon the man to issue a Gett. All of these tactics are equally considered in the eyes of Halacha to be acts of coercion which cause the Gett to be invalidated and therefore useless. And without a kosher Gett, her status is Eishes Ish, which means she's still married to her husband, Any remarriage or other consorting with a man that occurs as a result of that unkosher get carries one of the most serious sins in the Torah, with a punishment of death by heaven, and will forever taint her future offspring, rendering them mamzerim. That means that they can never marry a regular Jew ever again due to their mamzer status. Fact number 2. Litigating in civil courts is against the Torah. The Shulchan Aruch outlines the grave sin of litigating in civil court, which pertains to any matter, not only divorce. The Ramah states that such a litigant loses the right to a didnt hearing at a later date. This halacha has been disregarded and violated by the corrupt rabbis. Their chronic permissiveness is what has been allowing women and men to litigate in the civil courts against their spouses without any repercussions. The halacha states that if a person violates this law by litigating their case in the courts without valid permission from a reliable beis, then they lose their rights to a beis hearing at a later date. But unfortunately today there are very few reliable beis left that will never deviate from the truth and the halacha. So therefore, most women who go to civil court at the start of the divorce process have done so against the Torah. And even if she claims that she got a heter from a beis, it is like she received a heter from the beis of Doeg and Achitophel, because it will only enable her to commit adultery. The one-sided approach of these phony rabbis, which heavily favors the woman, is the exact reason, in my opinion, for the backlash of get refusal that we are seeing today. And rightfully so, due to the men feeling betrayed by their wives and by the rabbis. At the same time, I want to be perfectly clear that I am not a proponent of withholding a get for no justifiable reason, and I reiterate that you should not violate any local laws or ordinances through the withholding of a get. Any get procured as a result of this civil court litigation is invalid, as it was given under physical, emotional, or financial duress. So therefore, a woman receiving an invalid get through the above means is considered to be still married to her previous husband, and anyone consorting with or marrying her is committing adultery as per the Torah, and any children born from such a union are rendered mamzerim. Now, there are basically 3 categories of Jewish divorce situations. A. Koifin legarish. This is the rarest situation of all, the kind where we can coerce a get. However, it is rarely seen nowadays because it is not applicable in the vast majority of modern divorce cases. B. Chayev legarish aval ein koifin. This is a case where a man is told that he's obligated to divorce, but no coercion can be applied. We merely suggest to him that it is the right thing to do. And C. Ein chayev legarish. In this last case, the man is not at all obligated to divorce. Most divorce cases today fall into this 3rd category, and therefore any form of coercion or pressure will invalidate such a get. Yet we see the majority of beis worldwide violate this important halacha and coerce the husbands to issue a get. And the reasons the rabbis are not following the halacha is because of money, feminism, and their never-ending thirst for power. Chazal have stated, "Hachacham einov beroisho," which translates as a wise man has his eyes in his head, which means he ought to be prudent enough to prepare ahead of time. Therefore, I will now endeavor to offer you the following 4 tips in order to guide you as best as I can so that you can mitigate the damage that is inevitable in so many divorce outcomes. Tip number 1. There are certain jurisdictions worldwide where it is not recommended to get married or live in because their civil laws have been co-opted in order to force a man to give a get via a whole host of coercive tactics, whether it is through financial penalties, stiff alimony rulings, and even imprisonment. Examples of some of these places are the State of Israel, New York State, New Jersey, Maryland, and the United Kingdom. State laws are constantly changing, and new jurisdictions are always adopting such laws, so I encourage you to do your own research. But you must realize that the states that have adopted these anti-Torah coercive get laws have not enacted them at the sole discretion of their legislatures. They have done so at the behest of Torah-hating rabbis and community leaders who have an agenda of reforming the Torah laws of Jewish divorce. They have exerted pressure upon the legislatures through the use of much coaxing and cajoling, which brought about these so-called Gett laws. With the divorce rate in the frum community now already reaching 50%, it is imperative for every father and mother who have a son of marriageable age to not only consider what choice of wife that their son will take, but also where they will choose to live. Because if heaven forbid the marriage will end in divorce, his fate and the fate of his children will depend upon where he sets up his home. For example, a couple that either marries in or lives in Israel and then undergoes a divorce could see the husband going to prison for refusing to give a get, even when halacha dictates that a get cannot be coerced. Keep in mind that it is your halachic right to seek what is known as shalom BAIS, or reconciliation, except that by refusing to give a get, the man will automatically be labeled an abuser by misguided people to whom shalom BAIS is an alien concept, and he will eventually be imprisoned for the crime of wanting to stay married. Nevertheless, we are still seeing many young couples moving to the state of Israel, if only for the mitzvah of making aliyah or to live a kola life. And the man is totally oblivious to the potential danger that lies ahead of him, which is the consequence of living under the jurisdiction of Sodom and the laws of Amorah. I'm sorry to have to burst your bubble, folks, but I'm here to remind you that the laws in the modern state of Israel have nothing to do with the laws of our ancient Sanhedrin, who are God-fearing Jews that adhered to both of our Torahs 100%, and by that I mean the Torah Shebeksav and the Torah Shebal Peh. The laws of that great body were established according to authentic Torah Halacha. But it gets worse. I want to warn all men who even suspect that their wives might want a divorce to be extra careful and avoid visiting the state of Israel at all costs. This is because the Israeli government has just announced that any foreign citizen who is undergoing a divorce could be imprisoned in Israel for refusing to issue a get. That's right. And this is even if the divorce case is already being handled at a civil or rabbinic court in their own country. The state of Israel simply does not care whether or not another beis or civil court has jurisdiction over a foreigner's case. Much like the Taliban, the state-affiliated rabbanut will coerce anyone to perform a religious act, in this case, the issuance of a get, just because they can. There are dozens of such cases in the media, some of which I will link for you below. I recommend that you watch my video number 16 on this very subject, titled Why You Should Not Move to the State of Israel, and also to check out the references listed in the video's description box. Tip number 2. Never go to beis so long as the wife refuses to cancel all civil court proceedings and orders. As I've stated previously, most bias dins today do not operate 100% of the time according to authentic halacha in matters of gittin, but rather they rule at their own whim. I call them bias dins because they are biased against the man. The corrupt rabbis have multiple tools at their disposal which they use to intimidate us into submission. Some of the dirty tricks that they employ are public humiliation, expulsion from shuls, and the issuance of false seruvim. In my 17 years of experience dealing with my own divorce case, I have witnessed dozens of men whose lives and reputation have been destroyed by these corrupt bias dins. Therefore, I have undertaken the mission of educating and advising the public to be cautious, lest they fall prey into their hands. I have brought up my case numerous times in my previous videos, sometimes in great detail, in order to drive home to you the following realization. If in my own case, where I have followed halacha 100% by going to beis din, and even offering my ex 4 beis dins to go to, and yet she still violated the halacha by litigating in civil court, and then she obtained a gag order which prohibited me from speaking freely in front of any beis din, and even so I still deposited a get at a beis din despite not being required to by halacha. And yet still I have been victimized by these Taliban rabbis, which by that I mean the rabbis who ban. Together with their gangs of thugs, they labeled me an abuser and a Gett refuser and sanctioned me and my family through the issuance of several illegitimate seruvim. You can find out more about this by watching my first video titled Lana Ralbag Kin, the Fake and Phony Aguna, and also video number 12 titled Lana, Luna, and the Lunatics of the RCC, and also the video part 6, Rabbi Gestetner's refutation of the lies of Jacobson and Kahan, which I will link all of them below. Certainly then, I can assure you that in other cases which are not as clear-cut as mine, that these corrupt rabbis will rule in nefarious and illegal ways. The way a BAIS didnt rules against a man is by doing the following. They ignore the wife's halacha violation, such as litigation in civil courts, obtaining orders of protection, expelling a man from the marital home, kidnapping and alienating the children from their father, obtaining gag orders to prevent the man from speaking freely in front of a bezin, and by blatantly and intentionally ignoring the halacha in matters of coercion, custody of children, and division of assets. Therefore, it is essential for a man to not attend any bezin hearings until such time that the wife exits from and terminates all of her court proceedings and court orders. Not only is what she's doing a violation of halacha, but is also wrong in a practical sense, since you cannot have two separate jurisdictions handling a divorce matter. Tip number 3. Do not, I repeat, do not sign just any arbitration agreement or SHTAR BERURIM, but only the one I have attached to you below. The reason for this is that most BAIS dints do not want to allow you a halachic divorce, but rather they seek to render a verdict based upon their own whim and political affiliations. So what they will do is, if for example you have a son at a certain age of which according to halacha you are entitled to custody, you will never be granted custody because the corrupt BAIS dints almost always take the side of the woman. The way they trap us is by having us sign their arbitration agreement, which not only allows them to rule against halacha and without your ability to appeal the decision, but they've also built into their agreement a clause which makes their decisions enforceable in a civil court. This is in contrast with their arbitration agreement attached below, which affords you the right to request from them a detailed answer as to how they have arrived at their decision, and it also affords you the right to appeal if you find that they have erred in halacha. Should you find a beis din that will allow you to use this legitimate arbitration agreement, then you could use them, because then they would be mandated to follow the conditions stated in this agreement, and they would not be allowed to deviate from them. If your wife tries to summon you to a beis din while she is still litigating her case in the civil court, then you should respectfully reply that you will be glad to attend once everything in the court is canceled. I'm just letting you know of what will probably happen is that the BAIS din will rebuff your reply, and that they will refuse your right to sign a different arbitration agreement. They will also threaten you with a seruv or excommunication letter if you do not comply with their demands. But please, whatever you do, do not ever sign their SHTAR BERURIM, because it might turn into a death sentence for you. Tip number 4. Do not, I repeat, do not sign a prenup or postnup agreement written up by a corrupt rabbinic organization, for example, the RCA prenup. These rabbis have drafted an agreement meant to penalize the man only in the event that he refuses to deliver a get. So what will happen is that the man will be forced to pay his wife approximately $150 a day for each day that she has no get. This amounts to around $50,000 per year. One of the big problems with their agreement is that they never penalize the woman for all of her Torah violations, such as litigating in civil court. You see, these RCA rabbis take advantage of the naivete of the 23-year-old groom who knows nothing about the potential divorce saga that his blushing bride will put him through 12 years later. He trusts his yeshiva rabbi, who also sells him out by informing him that the signing of the prenup is the right thing to do. But will his rabbi come to his aid later to save him from his oppressors when the man attempts to achieve any halachic fairness in his divorce settlement? I think you already know the answer to that. and his rabbi will ultimately be responsible for the coerced get and for creating the sin of Eshes Ish and Mamzerim. This is a rabbi who will be ready to violate Lifnei Iver Lo Titen Michshol. Do not place a stumbling block before a blind man, and Lo Samod Adam Re'echo. Do not stand idly by your brother's blood, and countless other sins. In Tehillim, chapter 119, Pasuk 126, it states, Eis lasos lashem heferet torasecha, that in a time of need, we must stand up and take action for the sake of Hashem. These mitzvahs of the Torah are imploring us to not sit idly by when we see injustice happening to our fellow man, or when we see Chilul Hashem, when corrupt rabbis are tampering with the Torah and its authentic halachas. We must stand up and sanctify Hashem's name by opposing those that dare reform the Torah and its halachas. Mi Lashem Elai. It is for precisely this reason that I am coming here today to advise you regarding what you must do to stand up for yourself in order to not be victimized by the corrupt rabbis. I am also telling you what you must do in order to uphold our authentic Torah laws. By doing so, you will be committing an act of Kiddush Hashem by staying strong in the defense of the Torah laws and in the face of bullying, harassment, and intimidation on the part of rabbis and other people who seek to trample upon our Torah and its teachings. The advice that I'm giving you today is meant for those of you who seek the truth and are willing to fight for it. If a man is ever to succeed in achieving any fairness, pursuing the truth, following halacha, and issuing a kosher get, this can only be achieved by being prepared to mount a counter-offensive to the corrupt rabbis and their rulings. If you are not prepared to assert your halachic rights, then you might as well give up the fight early and save yourself the lawyer and bezin fees. There is a Talmudic concept of Ovid Inish Din Lenafshe. It means that when you see that there is no din and emes being conducted at our BAIS dins, then the Chachamim have stated that we should step up to the plate to render fair judgment for ourselves. So therefore, I implore all of you, men out there who are undergoing Jewish divorce and your wives are refusing to dismiss all of their court petitions and orders, and the Dayanim refuse to address their blatant Torah violations, while at the same time they are demanding a get from you, that you adamantly refuse to comply with those demands through the use of Ovid Inish Dilon and Nafshe. In this way, we shall demonstrate to the recalcitrant woman and the heretic rabbis that we will not be issuing a get so long as we are being coerced against our halachic rights, and that we refuse to issue an unkosher get, which the Torah forbids us to do, since this will cause the wife to stumble in the sin by remarrying under the false pretense that her get was kosher. If enough men stand up to these halachic infractions committed by their wives and the corrupt dayanim and refuse to give a get, then perhaps the community leaders will finally understand that we have a moral crisis on our hands, and that in order to fix this crisis, we must return to our Shulchan Aruch and conduct Jewish divorces according to authentic halacha. So there you have it, my friends. I have provided for you a roadmap of how not to become a victim of the rabbinic mafia system, which is very prevalent today and to which too many of us are totally oblivious. Too many people have been falling prey to these rabbinic charlatans posing as BAIS dins or dayanim on a daily basis. Now, of course, like anything else, there are exceptions to the rule, but in general, if you do not follow the instructions that I have set forth in this video, then you are at your own risk for accepting the fate of what type of get you will be giving or receiving, what will happen with your assets, property, and children, and all of the rest of the fallout that happens as the result of a divorce. I have mentioned numerous times in my previous videos that the Gemara in Masechet Shabbos, Daf 139a, states that the tragedies that befall the world, such as what we are seeing today, with all of the fallout caused by COVID-19, are happening as a result of the corrupt rabbis and Jewish judges. But for some reason, you will never hear your rabbi mention this Gemara during his sermon, only from me on this channel. Why is that? Well, it is just another example of how our rabbis today practice selective Judaism, in that they pick and choose which Gemaras to talk about and which ones to ignore, which mitzvahs to adhere to strictly and which ones can be reformed to better fit the modern times. So it is my hope that our community leaders will finally wake up and realize that unless we follow the dictates of our Chachamim, as stated in Masechet Shabbat, Daf 139a, that these problems will not go away. Our rabbis have stated that in the days of the coming of the Mashiach, we will find ourselves in a situation that will leave us bereft of authentic rabbis, the kind who are willing to stand up and defend the Torah and its halachas, especially in regards to Jewish divorce. The holy sages in the Talmud have informed us that in the period before the coming of the Mashiach, the rabbis will be like dogs. This statement has been interpreted to mean that our leaders will no longer lead and guide the people according to authentic Torah and halacha guidelines, the way true Jewish leaders going back to Moshe Rabbeinu have done, but rather they will succumb to societal fads and public pressure, which inevitably leads to the abrogation of authentic Torah law. I encourage you all to watch some of my previous videos, especially number 19, titled The Manufactured Aguna Crisis, and number 20, titled My Solution to the Gett Crisis. A lot of what I have said here today is referenced in my previous videos, and many of the documents and other proofs are cited there as well and can be found in the description boxes below those videos. I am sure you will find that the videos on this channel will help you get up to speed with what is happening today in matters of Jewish divorce. Thank you for watching, and see you all in the next video.